Hi and welcome all, high or low, butcher baker, tall or small. I am Grimnir, and this is the Grimnir Gate. The poor little hobbit sat down in the hall and put his head in his hands and wondered what had happened, and what was going to happen, and whether they all would stay for supper. The bell rang again, louder than ever, and he had to run to the door. It was not 4 after all, it was 5. Another dwarf had come along while he was wandering in the hall. He had hardly turned the knob before they all were inside, bowing and saying, "At your service," one after another. Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Glowin were the names, and very soon 2 purple hoods, a grey hood, a brown hood, and a white hood were hanging on the pegs, and off they marched with their broad hands stuck in their gold and silver belts to join the others. Welcome to this week's Tavern Talk. So, we're still stuck in the Forsaken Inn. It seems like my 2 friends weren't totally truthful when they told their story. They are looking at me in a funny way here, and they're looking even more funny at my dwarven friends. They look a bit ashamed though. So what you heard now was how Bilbo and Dori first met from Tolkien's original story, The Hobbit. And this week our 2 heroes met Dori again. And they had met him once before in Thorin's Hall, in the prologue, in the intro quest. Him and Dvalin. So, Dori is one of the 13 dwarves that set out on an unexpected journey together with Gandalf and Bilbo. But before I continue with Dori, I want to go all the way back to the 7 fathers that Aule or Mahal created. Tolkien mentions that among the original 7 fathers, Durin slept alone, not having a partner, which could be interpreted like the others were created in pairs, with a spouse by their side. In that case, also, the original dwarven fathers and their spouses together would be counted as 13, just as many as the unlucky number of dwarves in Bilbo, which only, of course, is speculation, based on very few lines in Tolkien's appendices. But it doesn't sound too far away from how Tolkien might have thought, considering all his knowledge in myths and religion and the meaning of magic numbers in tales and so on. So when the dwarfs came knocking at Bilbo's door, Dori is mentioned as the 5th dwarf arriving to Bilbo. He's described as wearing a purple hood, a color that may be connected to his royal blood, as Dori and his brother Nori and cousin Ori belonged to the house of Durin and was distant relatives to Thorin. As with many of the names of the dwarfs in Tolkien's work, the name Dori is from the Old Norse poem Völuspá, which means prophecy of the Völva or the seeress, a part there called Dvärgatal, recounting of the dwarfs, and its meaning, the name's meaning is borer or ogre man. Dori should be around or between 132 and 178 years old, considering the age of other dwarfs mentioned in the company. And he seems to be quite a cultivated dwarf and a capable flautist, as it is described in The Hobbit. "Now for some music," said Thorin. "Bring out the instruments." Kili and Fili rushed for the bags and brought back little fiddles. Dori, Nori, and Ori brought out flutes from somewhere inside their coats. So, when it comes to his personality or temper, both his grumpiness and what he likes in life is described in a passage when the company enters Trollshaws after a rainy day, looking for a dry campsite for the night. And suddenly Gandalf is nowhere to be found. "Just when a wizard would have been most useful too," groaned Dori and Nori, who shared the hobbit's views about regular meals, plenty and often. So, there's a little bit about his personality. But also in the book it's clear that Dori is the one of the dwarfs, except from Thorin, that actually develops some sort of bond or relationship to the little hobbit, even if it is with his typical grumpy style, and he actually saves Bilbo more than once, Dori is said to be the strongest of the 13 and is often found in the front line of battle. As when they are in Goblin Town. "Half a minute," said Dori, who was at the back next to Bilbo, and a decent fellow. He made the hobbit scramble on his shoulders as best as he could with his tied hands, and then off they all went at a run, with a clink of chains and many a stumble, since they had no hands to steady them with. So, after carrying Bilbo and them losing him, he at least refuses to take the blame as he talks back to the wizard. "Good heavens, can you ask? Goblins fighting and biting in the dark, everybody falling over and hitting one another. You nearly chopped off my head with Glumdring, and Thorin was stabbing here and there and everywhere with Orcrist. All of a sudden you gave one of your blinding flashes, and we saw the goblins running back yelping. You shouted, 'Follow me, everybody,' and everybody ought to have followed. We thought everybody had. There was no time to count, as you know quite well, till we had dashed through the gate guards out of the lower door and helter-skelter down here." So, he doesn't mind to talk back to Gandalf, and that he's got this grumpy style when they flee up in the trees when they are chased by wargs, and climbs down to help him back up, not without his usual grumbling. "You have left the burglar behind again," said Nori to Dori, looking down. "I can't always be carrying burglars on my back," said Dori. "Down tunnels and up trees. What do you think I am, a porter?" But still, Dori climbs down and fetches and helps the hobbit. Dori survives the battle of the 5 armies and the retaking of Erebor. The new king, after Thorin's death, Dain Ironfoot, gives him his share of the treasure, and he lives a wealthy and rich life in Erebor. And as we have seen in the game, he is still alive when the Fellowship is on their way to Rivendell. Most probably will he take part in the battle against the Dark Lord's forces during the War of the Ring. So, to summarize, Dori is a distant relative to Thorin Oakenshield and of Durin's house. He is dressed in a purple hood and wears a silver belt and plays the flute. This brother of Nori and cousin of Ori is the strongest of the dwarves in the company, and not afraid to risk his life to save a friend in need. And he likes his meals plentiful and often. All in all, as Bilbo would say, he is a decent fellow. On that I can see now that both Nergrim and Nirgrim nods in agreement. So let's hope we'll meet him again during our travels. And as always, we finish with some fun. This is about a dwarf and an elf traveling through the forest together. After they got their tent set up, they both fall asleep. Some hours later, the dwarf wakes up. The elf says, "Oi, elf, look toward the sky. What do you see?" The elf replies, "I can see the endless light of Elbereth Gilthoniel, the queen of stars in the darkest night." "So, what that tell you?" asked the dwarf. The elf ponders for a moment. "He tells me that of the greatness of creation, of night and day, of everything that Iluvatar wanted came to be, and was shaped by the Valar when they sang the Ainolinde. That the greatness of Eru and the Valar is unfathomable, that compared to them and the world they have made, we are still small and insignificant." "What does it tell you, dwarf?" "It tells me, elf, that you're dumber than a rock. It means someone stole our tent." That's all for now. So, see you around and take care all. And if you can, try and stick it to the man.